Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for being with us here tonight in this free webinar organized by Docsity in partnership with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business to take a closer look to starting business in New York City with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. Tonight with us will be Dylan Mosenthal, Senior Associate Director of Admissions at the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. We thank you very much for being here with us tonight. We'll wait a couple of minutes for everyone to join. So if you would like, in the meantime, you can write on the chat box, you can say hi, and you can let us know where you're connecting from. Tonight, we expect to have a lot of participants from a lot of countries, so it will be a pleasure to receive your greetings in the chat box. Then you can, if you have any questions for Dylan, you can put them on the Q&A box that you will find right here below in the Zoom menu. And we'll be happy to answer them all at the end of the presentation. I see that more people is coming in. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. My name is Lucia from Docsity. I will be the moderator tonight. And we will have with us Dylan Mosenthal from the Fordham Gabelli School of Business to take a closer look at starting business in New York City with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. I see more people joining. Hello, welcome, good evening. You can put your greetings on the chat box. You can let us know where you're connecting from. We are expecting so many people from so many different countries tonight. And if you have any questions for Dylan, our speaker tonight, you can put them on the Q&A box that you will find right here below in the Q&A box at the Zoom menu, and we will be answering them all at the end of the presentation. So just bear with us for a couple of minutes. I see more people joining. Just give a couple of minutes for everyone to join. We're expecting people from so many countries. The time frame could be very different. So we will just give them a couple of minutes to join. Tonight we are hosting this webinar organized by Docsity in partnership with Fordham Gabelli School of Business, and we will talk about studying business in New York City with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. Our speaker tonight will be Dylan Mosenthal, the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. Thank you everyone for joining and welcome. My name is Lucia from Docsity. You can use the chat box that you will find right here below in the Zoom menu. You can say hello and you can let us know where you're connecting from. Also, during the presentation, some questions might come up. You can put them all on the Q&A box you will find right here below in the Zoom menu. We'll be happy to answer them all at the end of the presentation. So bear with us just for a couple of minutes. I see more people joining. Okay, I'd love to know where you're connecting from. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at right now at this time. We have with us Dylan Mosenthal, which is the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Fordham Gabelli School of Business. And tonight we're going to take a closer look at starting business in New York City with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. So just, okay, I see more people coming in. Thank you everyone for being here with us tonight. I know you might have a lot of questions about the programs, about the school, about living in the city, about maybe admissions. You can listen to Dylan's presentation, and if something is unclear, if you would like to solve on a specific doubt on a specific topic, you can put your questions on the Q&A box. If you see here below on the Zoom menu, you will find the Q&A box. You can put your questions there. We will answer them all at the end of the presentation on the Q&A section. Thank you very much. Hi from Italy. Hello, welcome. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. As I said before, my name is Lucia from Docsity. I will be the moderator tonight in this webinar organized in partnership with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. Tonight with us, we have Dylan Mosenthal, who is the Senior Associate Director of Admissions, and we will take a closer look at studying business in New York City with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. So, thank you very much for being here tonight. Dylan, if you're ready, I will leave you the floor so that we can start with the presentation. Enjoy.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you, Lucia, and thank you everyone for joining. It is currently noon here in New York City, but I know people are calling or attending this webinar from all over the world. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. As Lucia said, my name is Dylan Mosenthal. I serve as the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Fordham University's Gabelli School of Business in New York City. Here at the business school, we offer a lot of programs from MBAs to specialized master's degrees in business. And I will spend some time covering all of the differences within our programs and how to go about applying to these programs. And we'll certainly talk about New York City really being, at the end of the day, probably the biggest value proposition of our business school. We are right in the heart of New York City, right in Midtown Manhattan. So we'll talk a little bit about how our programs benefit, the students in the programs benefit from having access to this city, a city that many people consider to be the business capital of the world, or one of the business capitals of the world. And as Lucia said, please, I like when these webinars are interactive. You're all here spending time with me now. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box. We'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can throughout the presentation. And certainly at the end, we will allot time just for the Q&A. So if you have questions, jot them down, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar. So I decided to start this off I don't know how many of you have been to New York City before, but I wanted to share just some pictures about where we are, because New York City, if you haven't been, it's a huge city. There's 12 million people who live in New York City. The New York City that you see in the movies is typically you're seeing the island of Manhattan. And that is where our business school is. We are right in what we call Midtown Manhattan. I put a little arrow here so you can kind of see where we're located. So we're right on the corner of Central Park. You see the Empire State Building right there in the middle of your screen. And then a little bit further down, that's Wall Street. But we are right in the heart of the city. So about 10 minutes away from Wall Street, 5 minutes walking from Midtown. And like I said, we'll get into how that location really helps to benefit our students in the variety of programs that we offer here at the business school. So here's just a little bit of a zoom into where the business school is in New York. So this is one of the several buildings that we own right in Midtown. This shot right here shows the business school and the law school. So if you see there to the left, that's the Time Warner building. That's one of the biggest media centers in the world, where CNN used to be headquartered. And then I think I have one more picture of our campus right here in Midtown. Up above there, you'll see, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor or not, but those are some dorms where students can live. And I always joke, where we are in New York City is probably some of the most expensive real estate in the world. So to be able to have a dorm room here is a very big luxury for students. I tell them you're probably not going to have an apartment like this in New York unless you're a Wall Street billionaire. But we are very lucky to have this campus right here where students have amazing views of the city. Manhattan, Central Park, you name it. Just great views being where we are on 62nd Street. So just to give you some stats about New York City and how it applies specifically to Fordham. So we have at Fordham University many different schools. There's the law school, there's the business school, Fordham Gabelli, there's the undergraduate institution. And within just the Gabelli community, which is just the business school, there are over 11,000 alums or former students who are still working and living in the New York City tri-state area. And why that is so important, and you in doing your research about what business school you might want to attend, you probably have heard this term, this notion of networking, and how important it is in this day and age to network in order to achieve your career goals in business. It is critical to be making these connections with people. I don't know if anyone wants to put in the chat box, what they're interested in doing for their careers. But the reality is, if you want to work in finance, or if you want to work in consulting, and especially if you're looking at looking to break into one of these firms that are based in New York City, some of these big bulge bracket banks, a Goldman Sachs, a JP Morgan, a McKinsey, an EY, you name it. Networking is going to be the way that you're able to secure these jobs. I think one of the biggest mistakes that incoming business school students make is that they come in and they think, well, if I score perfect marks in all of my classes, I will get hired. And the reality is that's never enough. Really, what you need to do on top of doing well in your classes is you need to be going out and shaking hands with people at the companies where you want to work. And that's where being in New York City is such a value add for our students, because we are surrounded by the highest concentration of Fortune 500 companies in the world, meaning every student is on a daily basis going out and meeting a former Fordham student or an alumni for coffee, to have a conversation with them, to get a sense of, what they do for their day job. Those sorts of connections are going to be the ones that allow you to get your foot in the door at a company and allow you to have a chance to potentially get an internship or get a full-time job. And I think it's really important that you consider this as you're looking at business schools. You're going to have to make connections with people in order to get your foot in the door. And being in New York City is obviously just a huge advantage to our students, because everyone is 5-10 minutes away. And able to be able to have those conversations. Another benefit of being in New York City, I think this is one that I certainly experienced. I graduated from the MBA program at Fordham. From the academic standpoint, a lot of our faculty members are actually working professionals in New York City. So we have traditional academics that teach courses, the folks that have, the highest degree in their fields, they have PhDs. But then we also have people who teach elective courses, maybe one night a week, who the other 4, during the day for 5 days out of the week, they're actually working in industry. They're working at an investment bank. They're working, in the IT department at a company, and they come and they teach a class in the evening. Again, that's a huge benefit, to be able to have that combination of perspectives in the classroom, both the theoretical, academic perspective, as well as the working professional perspective, which I think can be, a really interesting perspective, especially when you start taking elective courses at the business school. So I'm going to quickly just give you an overview of our programs. I think that'll be a good place to start, to give you a sense of what types of programs you can pursue at Gabelli. I will also talk a little bit about the admissions requirements, application requirements, so what the process is like to submit an application and be admitted into one of our programs. And then, like I said, we'll get into any questions that you might have. So I'll start off by talking about our MBA programs, and I have a sense that most of you attending on this call are not living in New York City. So I'm really going to focus on the top bar here, the full-time MBA, because the professional and executive MBA programs, those are really programs designed for working professionals. So these are designed for people who are working in New York City and want to take classes in the evening or on the weekends. The full-time MBA is a program that is designed for students all over the world. We actually have students from 24 different countries represented in this year's incoming cohort, which is really exciting. So just to give you a sense of our full-time MBA, and I'll get into specifics about the curriculum shortly, but the profile of student in a full-time MBA, and this is typical for most full-time MBA programs in the States. The profile student is someone who is looking to make some sort of career change. So it's not someone who just graduated from undergrad or who maybe only has 1 year of work experience. Typically, students in our full-time MBA have 5 years of work experience. They're already in kind of the early career stage, and they've decided that they want to make some sort of career change. And whether that change is big, sometimes people are looking to do a drastic pivot. They've worked in finance and now they want to work in marketing. And so they come to the MBA program in order to be able to facilitate that transition and get a management level role within this new industry. Sometimes the career change can be smaller. Sometimes people are just looking to change the functional role of their day-to-day. Other times the career change is purely geographical, right? We have students who, they work in consulting in Brazil and they want to work in consulting in New York City. And so they want to do a geographical pivot. They come, they plant their flag by attending our MBA program and then get a job working in the same field in New York City. But regardless of what type of pivot or career change it is, the MBA allows you to make that transition and not have to start at the bottom of the ladder, right? People who worked in marketing and want to go work in finance, they don't want to have to start at an entry-level position within a bank. They want to start at a management level position. And so the MBA allows you to do that, not only through the courses that you take, but also through a lot of the career development work that is built into the program. So let me quickly just give you a bird's eye view of what the curriculum looks like. And then after this, I will talk about some of our other programs as well. But this is what the 2-year full-time MBA program looks like at Gabelli. As you can see here, your first year is really dedicated towards giving you all of these foundational business skills, right? So you're taking courses in really all of the forces on a business. So accounting, finance, stats, economics, strategy, right? These are all of the aspects of business that really touch a firm. And I think it's important to talk about why this is, why you have to take all of these courses. Because sometimes I get the question from students, they say, I want to work in investment banking. Why do I have to take a marketing class? The reality is employers, when they hire an MBA candidate from our program or from any American MBA program, there is an expectation that you have a baseline proficiency in all of these foundational areas of business, because they're hiring you into management level roles. In order to be a successful manager, you need to be able to speak the language of all of the areas of business, even though your day-to-day might just be finance. Even if your day-to-day is just, working in accounting, for example, you may be managing a marketing department. You may be managing, an IT department. And the only way to be an effective manager is if you can at least speak their language. And so that's what you're doing in your first year. You're getting these foundational business skills put in place so that you can be an effective manager. So all that being said, your schedule is kind of picked out for you as a first year full-time MBA student. In your second year, that's when you start to specialize based on the skills you're looking to develop, based on the nature of your career pivot. So just to give you a sense of what types of electives you can take. So as you see here, in total, you'll take 8 electives. You can take electives across any of these concentration areas. Now, one thing I'm going to mention here, because I think this is a misconception that a lot of students have when they start our program. I even had this misconception when I started the program. I looked at these concentrations and I likened them to majors in undergraduate, right? When you all went and pursued your bachelor's degree, you declared what area of study that would be. You said, I'm gonna be a business major, and then you were pigeonholed into only taking courses within that area. There is no process like this at our business school and for our full-time MBA program. These are the categories in which we offer elective courses, but how you choose to go about picking which electives you're taking across these concentrations is ultimately up to you. So for example, I ended up taking courses out of accounting, out of fintech, out of blockchain, out of information systems, just based on the course itself versus what category it came out of. So I just wanted to mention that because sometimes students will come in and they'll lose sleep over, oh, am I going to be an accounting concentration? Am I going to be a finance concentration? You'll never have to make that decision. It really comes down to the course itself versus the category that it falls under. So just to go back to this slide for a second, I do want to talk about these boxes that are highlighted in different colors. The most important being this internship box in green. Because this, a lot of times students will come in and they'll think, well, I quit my job, I'm pursuing my MBA degree. I don't really need to worry about getting a full-time job until my second year because I'm going to be in the program for 2 years. But that is not the way it works for securing MBA caliber positions. The way it works at most firms, especially anyone who's looking to work in consulting or investment banking, you need to have an internship first before getting a full-time job, which makes a lot of sense, right? MBA caliber positions pay a lot of money. These are very competitive positions, and these companies want to see you in action before they give you a six-figure salary and a full-time job. So the way our students are presented with this career development process is when you arrive to New York City, your number one goal is to secure an internship. Once you've secured the internship, then you have to do well in that internship over the summer. And then at the end of that internship is when you will then be given a full-time job offer. But that is the way the process works. The internship is the first domino that needs to fall in order to really make this investment worthwhile. And so what's not really illustrated here in this curriculum slide is all of the work that is involved in securing that internship. I see I did see a question here, which is, what is the best networking strategy in New York City? And that's a great question. And that ties into exactly what I'm talking about. Networking is going to be at the forefront of what you're doing as soon as you arrive. And networking there's different strategies involved. One is put on, our career development center is going to put on what are called group networking initiatives, which are, they can be happy hours at a bar in New York City. Sometimes they're on campus, but it's where there are a lot of Fordham alums all in one place. And you get a chance to exchange business cards and shake hands and meet people. That is one kind of networking. The other kind of networking is the personal outreach that you're doing to people on LinkedIn, via email. And to be quite honest, that is the most valuable type of networking, the one-on-one connections that you're making with people in industry. And even those group networking events that I've mentioned, they're only impactful if you are following up with the people that you've met in those group settings, right? If you exchange business cards with someone who works at JP Morgan, they might not remember they met a lot of people that night. So the onus is on you to then, when you get back to your apartment, you send an email to that person and say, hey, I'd love to jump on a call or have a cup of coffee with you in the upcoming weeks. When are you free? But networking is going, whether it's, attending these bigger events or, sending out messages to meet with people at companies, it is critical to make those connections. And I'll share a quick story about this because I think this will be, important for you all to consider. We meet with our employer counterparts all the time, just to get a sense of, what they're looking for in our students. And I was just having coffee with one of the HR managers at a big investment bank. And I asked her, I said, how many of your full-time hires or internship hires, how many of them had a touch point with someone at the company before they got hired? So, how many of them, met with someone at the company before they even, went through the interview process? And she guessed that it was probably around 95%. So 95% of the people that were hired, the HR department was essentially presented their resume by an employee at the company. So think about that for a second. And this is the way she described it to me. She said, we get tens and thousands of applications through our online portal. People going onto the website, submitting an application, and kind of praying and hoping that they'll get a call back. And she said to try to have to pick people out of this, pile of thousands and thousands of applications is very difficult, and it's kind of like a random process, right? To try to figure out who out of these people that they've never met are going to be the ones that get called in for an interview. But then she explained that if anyone at the bank sends her department a resume, they automatically get a first round interview. They essentially skip the line because they are, a lot of these companies, they want to work on a system where employees are referring people they think will be a good fit. And so she was saying it's someone will send a resume and say, I just had coffee with this person, Dylan, he seems really interested in the company. I will automatically get a first round interview just because I was referred by someone at the company. You obviously want to be in that position versus in that stack miles high of applications that were submitted through the portal. And so the way to do that is to have those sit down conversations. And being in New York City means that there's no excuse for you not having those conversations. Everyone is right around you. It's just a question of being diligent, sending out the messages, putting yourself out there. But I wanted to share that story because I think it's fascinating to really see how it works, especially in these competitive firms. You do have to make those touch points in order to get your foot in the door. All right, so I talked about and by the way, everything I just said about networking and putting yourself out there, this applies not only for the full-time MBA, but also for any of our other programs. It's any person looking to get a job in business. And it applies also to our students in our specialized master's programs. So here is a list of the specialized master's programs that we offer at Gabelli. Now, before I get into the specifics here, the main difference in profile of student between a full-time MBA and a MS student is that a specialized master's student typically does not have any work experience. Most of the students coming into our specialized master's degrees are coming either straight out of their undergraduate program, right after getting their bachelor's degree, or they might have 1 year of work experience. But typically, students do not have any years of work experience. And from a curriculum standpoint, the way we treat these different master's degrees, you're becoming an expert in one functional area, right? So they're not going to be as broad as a full-time MBA where you're taking classes across all of these different foundational areas and then specializing. In the MS program, you are just specializing in one specific area. So as you can see here, we have a lot of different options, and we break them up into different categories. We have our analytics programs, so people looking to be working with data for the most part, so applied statistics, business analytics, marketing intelligence, which is essentially analytics applied specifically to marketing and marketing decisions that you make for a business. Our finance degrees, which are very, very popular. Obviously New York is considered the finance capital of the world. So, being able to study 5 minutes away from Wall Street, I think is a lot of students see value in that. So there's the general master's in finance, and then there's also the master's in quantitative finance. Master's in finance is going to allow you to pursue a lot of different options within the field of financial services. Quantitative finance is a very technical degree. It's at other business schools called financial engineering, but it's really designed more for a back end role where you're programming, doing sorts of that sort of work within a firm. But both very popular programs. Our management degrees, you have our master's in management, media management, and then a marketing communications degree, and then we have professional services as well, so accounting, and taxation. So these are all, for the most, with the exception of quantitative finance, these are all one-year degrees. Like I said, it's for people who typically don't have work experience. I've indicated here as well which ones are STEM certified. So obviously with a STEM certified degree, you do get those additional years on your visa, which can be very beneficial to international students. Let me move on to career development, but I see a couple questions here. Let's see if I can answer them because they might connect to what we're talking about here. Do you think it is better to aim to do an internship at a big company or in a medium, small company? So that's a great question. And I think there's pros and cons to both because you have, at a big company, you obviously, from a resume building standpoint, it's going to help open doors for other opportunities afterwards. But the benefit of being in a medium or small company, and this is something we constantly try to tell students, is that you're going to be getting a lot more of hands-on experience. So both can be really beneficial, both from a skill building and reputational perspective. But it's really going to depend on the student and what the specific opportunity is. But that's a very good question. I think most students tend to focus on just doing internships at the big companies, which again can be very fruitful for your career. But some of the positions that are offered in these smaller, less well-known companies can actually be much more beneficial from a skill building perspective. Which is the best networking story you or someone at Gabelli had? That's a great question. I actually have a couple. Let me think of a recent. Actually, I have a recent example, which was I think it showcases how valuable it is to be in New York City. There was a full-time MBA student who was working as one of my graduate assistants. So he was working on campus. He was helping me with conducting interviews for prospective students. And he was trying to get a job in private equity, which if anyone here on this call is looking to get a job in venture capital or private equity, anything that is, buy side finance, these are some of the most competitive positions out there. And I would venture to say, if you're not networking or meeting someone at the firm, you're just not going to get a job. It's that competitive to work in that area of finance. And so this student he showed me, he had a spreadsheet of all of the different Fordham alums that work at private equity firms in New York City. And he would send an email a day introducing himself and saying, I'd love to have a cup of coffee and learn more about what you do. And he showed up to come work for me one day, and he had just sent a message to someone who worked at a firm in Midtown, so maybe like 10 or 15 minutes away walking from our campus. And he sent the email, and then 10 minutes later, he got an email back saying, I'm free in an hour if you could be here in an hour. And so he came to me and he said, I know I'm supposed to be working, but is there any chance I can just go off quickly and meet this person? And I was like, of course, this is the most important thing right now is you securing a job. And so he went, he luckily had professional attire on. He went over, met the person for coffee, and that was the firm that he ended up getting a full-time job at. And I think that story is fascinating because it just goes to show all it's going to take is one positive interaction with an alum or someone who is within the network of companies that you're looking to work for. And in this case, it was from the point of emailing the person to having the conversation was a total span of an hour. And a lot of that, of course, due to the fact that we're right here in New York City. So I have a lot of examples like that. But again, all it takes is just taking the step to go and message people and how far that can take you in your career hunt. So that was a great question. I think I skipped over one about housing in New York City. Do we offer housing for students? So we do offer some housing for students. I'll quickly go back here a couple slides. So this big building here that you see behind our law school, those are all student dorms. Now, for specialized master's students, you apply to be in this housing, but for full-time MBAs, typically the full-time MBAs are just getting their own apartment. So these are more likely reserved for specialized master's students. And again, we give you a lot of information once you're admitted on what that process looks like for securing housing. Another question here about, are there more positions open for STEM professionals than business professionals? So that's a great question. I do want to mention that you're asking the right question, and I think it's very important, if you're not aware, that even if you are in a STEM certified degree, the only way that you're able to secure the visa benefits of being able to stay an additional 2 years on your visa is if you are securing a STEM position. And those can be, those differ from, what people consider, general business positions. And again, we work very closely with our students on what, making sure that if they do want to stay for an additional 2 years without having to get an H-1B, that they're finding STEM certified positions. I would say there are more STEM positions now than ever before, simply because of this influx of big data and the need for people having analytical skill sets. So there are more positions within the STEM field, but they're also very competitive. So I would say that there are more business professions than STEM roles specifically. I think that'll be the case for a while, but just because there are more business specific roles does not mean that there's an absence of STEM roles. There are still a lot of STEM positions that you can apply for. But good question, a good question that you need to be asking yourself as well, if you're looking to get those additional benefits on your visa. I talked about career development a little bit when I was giving you my network spiel, but this is just a sense of where some of our students have landed, a very small snapshot of the companies, and just a sense of beyond just networking, what are some of the other services that our career development team will provide to our students. So there's a lot of one-on-one career advising, a lot of technical skill building workshops. You practice your interviews with the career development team. They'll bring companies on site. So there's networking, which is one big category of what they help you do, but then there are also a lot of services as well. Okay, I'm gonna, because I know we only have about 20 minutes left, so I'll quickly talk about the application requirements, and then we can dedicate the rest of the time to answering your questions. So here you have just a breakdown, and this is consistent really for all of our programs, whether it's specialized masters or the full-time MBA. But just a list of what is required. Again, all this information is on our website, so I won't go specifically through every item here. I will quickly talk about the GMAT and GRE exam, because that is an optional requirement, and typically we get a lot of questions about what optional really means. So what I will say is you can complete an application without submitting a standardized test. What we traditionally use this test score for is to get a sense of your ability to handle the quantitative nature of the program. So what I tell students is there needs to be a degree of self-awareness as you're applying. If you feel that you have a strong quantitative foundation, whether that's through your undergraduate degree or if you're a working professional based on your working responsibilities, then you don't need to submit a GMAT or a GRE exam, because we already have the evidence as a committee. Oh, this person studied mechanical engineering, this person studied physics, this person studied finance. They already had that foundation in place. They don't need to take a test. For other people who might not have that background, the standardized test can help us check that box, give us a sense of this person can handle the quantitative nature of the program. So I do want to put that out there as a question you need to ask yourself when you're applying to our business school or other business schools where the test score is optional. We're really looking to extract that piece of information, whether or not this person can handle the numbers and the quant work. So just wanted to point that out. And then just as far as, I'm sure everyone's on different timelines when it comes to when they want to start business school. But if you are looking to start in the fall, here's a list of the deadlines. The January 13th deadline has obviously already passed, but there are 2 more, March 17th and May 26th. So you can apply by those dates for entry in the fall. And then what I will say too, for international students, I highly recommend that you apply by the March 17th deadline. And I see a question just came in about visas for foreign students. So we do work with you on getting, we are sponsoring your F1 visa to be a student at Gabelli. But that there is obviously a lot of processing that takes time, right? You have to do a visa appointment in your home country. There's a lot of documents that have to be sent back and forth, which is why we ask that you apply by the March 17th deadline to make sure that there's adequate time for you to get that visa in hand before you arrive to New York. I will briefly talk about the fees, because I see a question about scholarships. So this is all kind of tied to the fees. So here you'll get a sense of what the tuition fees are for the full-time MBA there on the top left, and then the MS programs at the bottom left, as well as some of the fees that are incurred for each program. So this clearly illustrates that this is a huge investment, right? This is a huge investment. Pursuing any business degree is a big investment of money. It's a big investment of time, which goes back to what I was saying about, this need. If you're really, what justifies the cost of a program is getting a big return on your investment. And in order to get that return on your investment, that's where all of the work involved with networking and the Career Development Center is so critical. Because those that go out there and do the right thing and are following the instructions of the career development team and are shaking hands and making these connections, they're the ones who end up with these very high-paying jobs in New York City. But you have to be willing to do that in order to get that return. That is something that is critical, because it is a huge investment of your time and your money. Now, given the cost of the degree, there are a lot of different ways to help subsidize the cost. One of the questions here were about scholarships for international students. We do offer scholarships to both domestic and international students. We don't discriminate one way or the other. So to give you a sense, for the full-time MBA, the scholarships range from as little as $30,000 all the way up to full tuition scholarships. And then for the Masters of Science, they range from $10,000 to $30,000 for the program. I see a question here about what are they off? Are they merit-based scholarships? Yes, these are purely based on the strength of your application and the merits of your background. So we're looking at the strength of your resume, your undergraduate GPA, your essays, right? How you presented in your interview. All those sorts of things factor into how we distribute scholarships. And then beyond the scholarships, I mentioned graduate assistantships earlier when I was sharing that story about the person doing the networking an hour after he sent his email. But graduate assistantships are essentially on-campus jobs. So they're jobs where you can either work in administrative capacities. So our admissions team has graduate assistants. The career development team will make use of graduate assistants. And then you can also do graduate assistantships with faculty members. So helping them with their research or helping them with offering office hours for their classes. But regardless of what type of graduate assistantship position you take on, the pay is in the form of tuition remission. So you're essentially deducted the hours that you work from your tuition bill. All righty. I know I just presented a lot of information, and I do want to turn the floor over to you all to ask your questions. I am going to leave this slide up. If you have questions for me, here's my email. I'm more than happy to be a resource for you. And then I also put down the email of my colleague, Christina Sikowski, who oversees admissions for our MS programs. Email either of us. We're more than happy to answer your questions, or if you want to hop on a Zoom call, more than happy to do that as well. So thank you all very much. And yeah, Lucia, I guess we'll open up the floor for more questions if people have them.
Sure, I see the question keeps coming in. Thank you very much, Dylan, for the presentation. Some of these questions were already answered during the presentation. It was nice to see how you entangled all the topics with all the questions that were popping. So we do have okay, we did cover the scholarships part.
Yeah, I see a couple of questions here that I didn't get to. So I'll get to the first one here about Gabelli degrees over other business schools in New York City. I think that's a great question. There are a few business schools here in New York City. I think all of them benefit from all the advantages I already talked about of being in New York City. I think what makes us different than other New York City business schools is primarily one thing, and that is size. So all of our programs are significantly smaller in class size compared to our peers. And that is very much by design. So even though, in a given year, we might take in 100 full-time MBA students, we will break you up into groups of about 30 for your classes. And I would even say that once you're done with your foundational classes, those classes get even smaller. I had classes in my second year that were, 10, 15 students. And I think the benefit of that is that you're really immersed in an active learning environment versus, a big lecture hall where there's hundreds of people and there's not as much kind of active learning happening. And when I say active learning, I mean, there's an expectation that you're going to be asking questions, challenging opinions, presenting. There isn't a lot of just kind of sitting and taking notes. You're very much actively immersed in what you're learning in that specific class. And I think it also helps from a community building standpoint. You get to know your classmates extremely well. You get to know faculty members extremely well. So I think that is certainly the biggest differentiator, and that's really by design, that we keep you in much smaller groups than some of our peers in New York City.
Yes, of course, it makes a difference also in terms of networking, as you were saying before. The faculty and also the colleagues could be a good point for networking in the present and also in the future. You never know which connections are going to take you to your next job, right?
Absolutely. And there's been stories of faculty members getting jobs for students based on their personal network. So that's a great point, Lucia.
Okay. So I remember you answered a question about the availability of the job positions in STEM fields and business fields. So I'd like to go a little bit further on that. Apart from STEM and business, which ones would you say that are the most required profiles right now on the job market? Always talking about what Gabelli.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would even go away from categorizing them as STEM or business. I think the skill that that's industry agnostic, that whether you're working in finance or marketing or HR, whatever it might be, the ability to work with data is at the top of the list for all these different companies across industry. And when I say work with data, I mean being able to analyze data, being able to work in spreadsheets, being able to distill data and be able to make informed business decisions based on that data is a skill that, in having conversations with our employers, they all indicate it's critical. This is the era we live in now. We live in the era of big data. And when they're hiring people to be in these very important roles at companies, they're going to be ensuring that you're someone who can not only understand data, analyze data, but also be able to tell stories with data. And I think that will apply to roles across industry. So, there's a reason why our specialized master's in business analytics is one of the most popular programs, not only for incoming students, but for employers to come recruit out of. It's because there's a need across companies for new talent that can work with all of this new data that has been generated over the past, 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much, Dylan. Then we have a question saying, how's life after admission? What does the day-to-day look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So once you're admitted into the program and you've decided that you want to come, first of all, we're all very excited. We love when we have our new students, come to New York City on the first day. So regardless of the program, there will be a pretty significant orientation that happens before you're actually officially starting. So we want to ease the transition from when you're admitted to when you actually start. We know that this is a big transition. A lot of you are moving across the world to be here. So we work with you virtually before you even set foot in New York on things like, how do you set up a bank account in New York? How do you get a cell phone in New York? Housing, right? All these sorts of questions that are more life questions you might have about making this huge change. And then once you do arrive in New York, we work with you for, in the case of the full-time MBA, an entire month before you actually start your classes. For MS programs, the orientation is usually about a week. But getting you familiar with the city, how do you get around the city? How do you use the subway? What are some of the skills you need from a networking perspective before you're going out and reaching out to people to network? So that's all happening before you start. And then once you actually start, the day in the life is going to look, pretty similar for most full-time students, regardless of whether it's MBA or MS. You're going to be in classes Monday through Friday. Typically, you have 2 classes a day, and then most classes will wrap up usually around like 3 o'clock. And then that's where a lot of the events will happen. So a lot of students will join clubs and organizations. So there may be guest speakers that come, to speak to students. There could be networking events that I, spoke to earlier. But typically, your days are pretty jam-packed with classes during, the morning and the early afternoon, and then all of the other programming that's involved with skill building and career development in the late afternoon, early evening. And then weekends, we always say, that's the time to go in. And obviously, if you have homework and projects, you can, come to the business school and work on those. But obviously, being in New York City, you want to go and immerse yourself in the culture as well. So there's I've been in New York for 7 years, and I still have done maybe about like 20% of what I want to do in New York because there's so many things to do.
Immerse in the culture and the cultures in the world, because it's such a cosmopolitan city with people from all around the world. So many, so much people to know, so many cultures to get closer to.
Exactly.
We have a very international community at Fordham, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned just within our full-time MBA, students from 24 different countries, and that's not even talking about our MS programs where we have students from all over the world. So it's and to go back to the question about, the benefit of small class sizes, I think being surrounded by people who come from different cultures and being able to hear their, how they view a business problem. For, I always talk about my experience in the MBA program being so valuable, not only because of what I learned from our faculty members, but I say what was unexpected was how much I learned from my peers. You'd be sitting next to someone who worked in investment banking in New York City, then someone who worked in consulting from Brazil, and then to your left, you had someone who worked in, was a software engineer in Italy, whatever it might be, but you have people who worked in different backgrounds, in different countries, from different cultures. And that really provides a great learning environment because, again, you're in an active learning environment where everyone is sharing their perspective. It just helps enhance the learning environment.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. So about this question that is asking about in case of studying accounting and finance, will the material be with international or local law and taxes? Good. It's a little specific, but maybe you can give a general idea.
Yeah, good question. So for the majority of the foundational courses, and especially when it comes to accounting, it will be U.S. accounting and tax law. There are elective courses that get into international accounting and tax law. Those are specific courses that you can opt into. But again, the majority of our students are looking to work in New York City. And so a lot of the foundational kind of required courses are going to be based on the local tax law. Good question.
Okay, thank you, Dylan. But talking then about graduation, would you say that maybe it's different from the ABA than from the master programs in general, but would you consider that your graduates, they tend to stay in the US or they tend to work internationally?
Yeah, so the majority are working in the US. What I will say is, for international students, it is very competitive to get sponsorship from companies. That's the reality of the situation we live in. And so what our career development team does is work very closely with international students on having a plan A, which can be, working in New York City, but then also simultaneously pursuing a plan B that involves you getting a job somewhere internationally. And so we have students, I'll give you an example. We had a student who went and did an internship at a big Fortune 500 company that had very limited spots for sponsorship in their New York City branch. But they really liked the student and enjoyed their time during the internship and said, we want you to work in London if you'd be willing to take this job offer in London. Because right now we are at capacity with our sponsorship for New York City. And that student ended up in London and then 2 years later transferred to New York City. So, but that has to be part of the strategy that the career development team is putting forth, is that you're not putting all your eggs into one basket. You're not going to apply to only companies that have a headquarters in New York, right? They want you to have options so that there is that. If you're not going to be able to get a job in New York, you'll still be getting a high paying management level position in another global hub somewhere in the world.
Yeah, the more flexible you are, the more opportunities or chances to get to your dream you will have. Is that right?
100%. And I would even say that flexibility applies to cities in the States. We've had students who say they only want to work in New York City, and there are places that are willing to say, hey, you come to our Chicago or our Los Angeles department. And so being even flexible from that standpoint, I think, is important too.
Okay. Which one would you think is your most popular program at the moment, and maybe why?
Yeah. So from the MS side, it's definitely business analytics. I mentioned that earlier. I think that there is, if you look at the industry right now, regardless of, I say industry generally speaking, what has changed the most in the last 10 years has been the influx of big data and all this new data that's being generated, and the ability to collect data in ways that you used to never be able to do, which has opened up a huge need across companies. And so I think students, they recognize that, right? So getting any sort of analytics degree is going to make them very valuable from an employer perspective. So business analytics is our most popular, and then the full-time MBA, certainly within our suite of MBA programs, the full-time MBA is the most popular.
Okay, and I know that at Gabelli you do this education, and you're together with the students, just trying to prepare them for their next job. And I know you pay attention also to soft skills, not only the hard skills, right? What would you say is the most important soft skill?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think humility and a willingness to learn and work hard is something that not only the admissions committee is looking for, but we know that's what the employers are looking for. And I actually had a conversation with someone he's one of the head traders at a big investment bank, and he's a friend of mine, and we were talking candidly. And he was saying, one of the big mistakes that a lot of students make is they hyper focus on the technical stuff. They're able to answer any technical question in an interview. And he was saying the most important thing he wants to see is someone that clearly has a genuine desire to learn and be an asset at the company. He was saying they'll take that person who might not have the best technical skills over the person who has great technical skills and maybe comes in with an ego or thinks they know it all. He's like, we can teach you the technical skills, but you need to have at your core that humility and that willingness to learn in order for us to want to hire you into the job. So
yes, that's maybe when you're already inside a company, as you said, it's easier to acquire, to learn the technical skills than to modify your soft skills. Right?
Exactly right.
So that's very interesting, because I think no many students or no many schools, they pay attention to this point, and it's crucial.
It's
you
crucial.
Can find many people with a similar curriculum, but when it arrives the moment to choose for an employer between one candidate and the other, they will surely choose the one with better soft skills.
Without a doubt.
Okay, thank you very much, Dylan. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add. In the meantime, I'm putting the email addresses you have right now on the screen. I'm putting them on the chat. Maybe it will be easier for our participants to copy them from there. I don't know if there's something final that you would like to say before we finish.
Yeah, well, just thank you all. I know you're all very busy, and for some of you, it's nighttime, and you have a lot of things to do. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me talk for an hour. But certainly, if you're interested in talking more, specifically about your background, the programs that you're interested in, please message Christina or myself. We're here to help you. And if you want to hop on a Zoom or just exchange emails, more than happy to be a resource for you. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, Dylan, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to moderate this webinar. Your presentation was very interesting. As a matter of fact, we received a lot of questions, which reflects, I guess, the interest of our participants tonight. I want to thank very much our participants, which, as Dylan said, they're connecting from many parts of the world. Maybe they're sleepy, maybe they have to work, maybe they're eating. We don't know, but they decided to dedicate an hour to us this webinar. If you would like to request the certificate of attendance issued by Docsity, you can send your request with an email to webinar@docsity.com. Put in the webinar you're referring to, the email address you used to join this presentation, and your first and last name. My name is Lucia from Docsity. I was moderator tonight of this free webinar organized by Docsity in partnership with Fordham Gabelli School of Business, a closer look at starting business in New York City with the Fordham Gabelli School of Business. Thank you very much, Dylan. Again, thank you very much for all our participants. We will be waiting for you in the next event organized by Docsity in Fordham. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.